Gold. Born pure and immaculate in the heart of dying stars, gold has captured the imagination of mankind since time immemorial. What enrapturing magic lies in that soft yellow luster? Why has gold enchanted so many for so long with its soft, pillowy glow and warm, gentle yet firm embrace? What mysteries lie in gold if we dare to follow it down the forbidden path into the delicate folds of gold's sweet?
Hey, is this getting weird for anyone else?
Gold. 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 Gold.
I can't be the only one who's getting spammed with ads on the subject of gold, right? Whether it's over-polished YouTube spots or TikTok finance guys pushing their trading courses, a lot of people seem to want me, Dan Olson specifically, to buy gold. Most ads for investments are fairly similar and just kind of wash into the background radiation of daily life, but this one caught my attention.
I'm going to tell you a story far more incredible than I ever imagined. There's nothing else like it. A miracle of nature. I'm talking about gold. And this is worth
That is the Suicide Squad's own Idris Elba headlining a YouTube documentary on gold distributed by the World Gold Council, whoever they are. I'm assuming they were the villains from Captain Planet. Gold, A Journey with Idris Elba, promises to take the viewer on an eye-pleasing, globe-spanning adventure peering into the fascinating and complex relationship between humanity and Element 79, the ways gold intersects with history and technology, and the result is, well, I'm not going to bury the lead here. This is corporate propaganda. It is not particularly good, but its existence is interesting. These kinds of celebrity-hosted corporate spin pieces are a bit of a relic in this day and age, usually relegated to industry trade shows or maybe looping on a screen in the back corner of some regional museum's geology exhibit. The Mineral Journey, sponsored by the World Gold Council. You know, that kind of thing. What's unusual is how hard it's being pushed to a lay audience. If you even glanced at something finance-related lately, odds are you got pushed the trailer as an ad.
What is it about gold that's got us so hooked? There's no sticking one in your pocket and getting out of it, is there?
Now, first of all, in the abstract, a documentary about gold is exactly the kind of thing that I'd watch. Gold is a genuinely compelling subject worthy of exploration, especially by a documentary team with, like, a travel budget and at least some access to the operations of a working mine. You could fill the running time of a documentary just discussing the chemical properties of gold, its resistance to corrosion, its malleability, and how those elemental traits, those quirks of physics and chemistry, inform its place in culture. Gold is at once a practical and useful metal, but also a social construct, an idioform that connects its actual uses and various imposed social meanings. Any comprehensive answer to the question, what is gold, unavoidably carries an emotional component, and that is a complex thing to unwind. So, here's some fun facts about gold. Gold is incredibly resistant to corrosion. The main threats to things humans build and use are oxygen, water, salt, and UV radiation, and gold is, for all intents and purposes, immune to all of them. It neither rusts nor rots, and aside from Instagram influencers, nothing eats it. Gold is pretty rare. Of the 94 naturally occurring elements found in Earth's crust, gold is ranked 75th. Making up 4 times 10 to the negative 7% of the crust. Even though it is rare in terms of the total mass of the Earth, its global distribution is widespread, with significant deposits on every continent. Also, relatively rare in the context of the mass of the Earth still means warehouses full of the stuff in human terms. Despite this rarity, gold has historically been rather convenient, with nearly pure gold nuggets being found in surface-level deposits, rivers, and former rivers. Since it doesn't corrode, gold exposed by the elements stays shiny and easily identifiable. Gold is extremely malleable, to the point it can be formed into threads a single atom thick, and then those threads can be stretched even further before breaking. It can be rolled into sheets so thin that they become semi-translucent while still retaining structural integrity. It can be polished so smooth it is the material of choice when a mirror requires maximum precision, such as those in space telescopes. Gold is hard enough to make useful household objects out of, but soft enough to be worked with stone tools without smelting. Gold isn't consumed by most of the things humans use it for and can be readily recycled and repurposed simply by smelting it into something new. St. Edward's crown could easily be reduced back to a 2.23 kilo ingot of gold for a second time in history after English Parliament melted the original medieval crown in 1649. We did it once before, Charles, we can do it again. As a result of all of these cosmic coincidences, humans have been using gold since prehistory, and its basic industrialization has been invented multiple times around the world. Putting all that another way, unlike basically every other workable material at our disposal, a trinket made of gold can be sunk to the bottom of the ocean for tens of thousands of years and be dug up functionally unchanged. The timeline of gold is the timeline of geology. This physical trait, this resilience, gives it an allure of everlasting value. Even this cheap little souvenir bottle of gold wafers comes with a little card promising it is a gift of remaining value. There is a narrative around gold that starts in its physical properties but balloons into its own collection of cultural signifiers, its own mythology, and any thorough discussion about gold will inevitably intersect technology, colonialism, war, and climate change. So when we talk of gold, we're really talking about three distinct yet entwined things, all sharing a name. Gold the element, gold the narrative, and gold the commodity. And it is this last one that is the subject of our conversation today. Not everything is rosy for gold. Gold as a commodity faces a number of challenges, some with roots going back decades and some more modern. Gold has, dare I say, a bit of an image problem. Gold, for a long list of reasons that are not what this video is about, is a favorite of conspiracy theorists, preppers, and just really a whole host of weirdos. They hoard it, they accuse governments of manipulating it, they promote it with an evangelical zeal.
Getting ready. Come in. How do you plan on supporting my granddaughter, young man?
I'm only 17, sir.
What can provide her with the brightest future?
A home?
Wrong. Gold.
Gold?
It's never too early or too late to secure your future with gold. Gold is always...
Just to contextualize this for my younger viewers, this is not a lost comedy skit. That's the guy who did burglaries for Nixon, shilling gold.
So, safe to say, nothing attracts a crank quite like gold, and that definitely impacts how the wider public thinks of gold as an investment.
Call Roslyn Capital and tell them Gordon Liddy sent you.
Alright, I just want to take a second just to unwind the facts of this. Despite the popularity of gold amongst people who own doomsday bunkers, the rationale that they're working from isn't unsound. If you were an investor back in the Netherlands in 1635, which asset would deliver a better return over almost 400 years? Tulips or gold? In the long run, you can be pretty confident that any gold you have will still be abstractly valuable in the indeterminate future. So on one hand, gold as an abstract financial instrument is unlikely to go anywhere, but on the other hand, while gold is a safe bet for your 400-year plan, it's less of a sure thing in your 5-year portfolio. Gold doesn't pay interest, so it doesn't thrive in the low inflation, low interest climate of the bull run, but it's also less appealing in our current high interest climate. And for the sound money, gold standard Austrian economics crowd, gold has seen heavy competition from cryptocurrency. The majority of the accessible gold has probably already been mined, and after hundreds of years of panning and digging, we've found most of the easy stuff. New discoveries and new operations are becoming increasingly expensive. As the documentary demonstrates with breathless wonder, many modern mines, particularly the big high production mines, are thousands of meters deep, and all mines involve displacing massive volumes of rock.
You feel stress, you feel...
You know, it's just that, it's the idea that we're going down into the center of the earth.
Mines are also under increasing scrutiny. The average consumer is more aware than ever of the numerous impacts of gold mining. There's both consciousness of the systemic impacts as well as greater access to information about working conditions. For instance, less than 2 weeks before the documentary was released, a gold mine in Zimbabwe collapsed, killing at least 9 miners. So we're going to, for now, set aside the question of if these mines should exist at all, whether or not the gold that they're digging up even needs to be dug up in the first place, and just for a moment put ourselves in the mindset of a mine operator. We don't need to empathize with them, but we do need to understand their incentives. Mine operators don't dig up and hoard gold like they're playing Minecraft, they dig it up and sell it. Making a profit from a gold mine requires the company to thread a needle. Mining operations have enormous upfront costs, and demand for gold is driven overwhelmingly by bearish sentiment elsewhere. Gold has its best days when the market is crashing. This means that operating a gold mine can be precarious, and the mine is extremely exposed to the price of gold. Even small increases in the value of gold translates to massive profits for the mines, and, in reverse, small decreases or lengthy lulls can be dire. Gold may be the safe pick in the long term, but in the short term, investment in gold can lead to a lot of anxiety. Enter the World Gold Council. The WGC is one of the world's leading authorities on gold, and you'd hope so, given that the council is comprised exclusively of major gold mining companies. The organization's sole purpose is to push demand for gold. That isn't an accusation, it's not even a provocative statement. The World Gold Council is extremely upfront with its objective to promote the interests of its members, who are, again, big mining companies. The organization was founded in mid-1987 by the most forward-thinking mining companies. And they were absolutely forward-thinking, because before the end of the year, gold's value would begin a sustained decline that would persist for the next 15 years. These sorts of lobby and marketing groups are actually pretty common, promoting not just a specific company or brand, but an entire class of product, and they're all technically nonprofit organizations as a result. The World Gold Council exists in a weird spot on the spectrum of propaganda. They lobby governments, they spin market trends, and they greenwash mining activities, but their ultimate goal is to convince serious investors to buy gold directly and put their money into gold mines. Their clients sell literal gold. The WGC sells the idea of gold.
You are precious. You are brilliance. You are gold. You are gold.
Bro, I've been there, but gold saved my portfolio.
A tip for you. Visit invest.gold.
Visit invest.gold to see why gold is everyone's asset.
Stability, security, protection. You shouldn't have to choose. Gold, your strategic advantage. Visit goldhub.com.
Like, this isn't online crank forum stuff, these aren't meme stocks, they don't represent tiny artisanal mines that consist of 3 dudes sharing the one jackhammer. Their main goal is convincing investors to give millions of dollars to industrial operations that will move millions of tons of rock. They can't have a reputation for spreading disinformation. So while their job is propaganda, they are considered a reputable source for research on gold. But that doesn't stop the World Gold Council from being implicated in countless conspiracy theories, typically painting it as a psyop.
I long concluded that the World Gold Council exists to make sure there never is a World Gold Council.
So you can try, but you'll never escape the cranks.
Well, there's some of us who have suspected since GLD was put together that it is really it's another mechanism in the tool of the central bankers and their bullion banks to be able to use the public's investment gold to apply it to hot spots in the market to keep the price down, that it's another tool of gold price suppression.
So, Gold, A Journey with Idris Elba is gold mining propaganda. Again, don't take it from us, take it from Joe Cavatoni, Chief Marketing Strategist for the World Gold Council.
The documentary was commissioned, simply put, to support our ambition as an organization to help the world really understand the value of gold and really the experience of its transformative power, you know.
We're going to come back to this interview a few times. It's very interesting. But yeah, then he just lists some mining industry talking points.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of key messages that are in the film. I'm going to just highlight a few. The first is that for every one job that a gold mine produces, 6 indirect jobs or jobs around the community of that gold mine get created, which a lot of people don't realize that.
It is as subtle as a gold-plated toilet. The documentary itself has a bit more of a deft hand when it comes to smuggling the agenda in with the info, but not that deft a hand.
These things, even though they mean a lot to the artist, but they actually carry the weight of the money that they
100%.
That, like, you know, it's not like it's ever going to depreciate.
100%. It's the same thing buying gold, their investments.
That isn't subtext, that's just text. The documentary allegedly features Idris Elba supposedly going on a globe-trotting adventure to shed light on humanity's ancient relationship to gold. In actuality, it's a virtual tour of gold mines that all belong to members of the World Gold Council, and each segment exists to either counter a popular criticism of the gold mining industry or pitch the mine as an investment opportunity. Elba visits mines in Canada and South Africa, meets the gold-bedecked Ashanti king Otumfor Osei Tutu II in Ghana, gets a tour of a Bank of England gold vault, hangs out with famous hip-hop jeweler Abs the Jeweler, and narrates segments on mine cleanup, gold jewelry in India, the California gold rush, and a straight-up marketing pitch for gold prospecting in Peru. Like, just to be clear, every mine credited in the documentary belongs to a WGC member corporation. And they play us all the hits. Gold mines foster local economies. They build infrastructure. Mining companies totally clean up after themselves. They're even on the front lines of battling malaria. Though, on that note, even the doc doesn't bother to pretend that battling malaria is an altruistic endeavor. It's because they lose more to sick days than the cost of R&D on new pesticides.
Out of the workforce of 8,000 employees, every month, you had about 6,800 of these employees and their dependents reporting to the mine hospital for malaria. And so the mine decided to establish a malaria control program.
It's hard to overlook the fact that the documentary's global scope has less to do with the grandness of the subject matter and more as a matter of cherry picking. The documentary is unique partly because it would be utterly banal in a different context. The film is composed of a series of 4 to 6 minute sequences that, again, would normally be looping in the corner of a museum installation. The fact that something so insubstantial is being pushed so hard is kind of fascinating in itself. They had Idris Elba money, and they chose to spend it on this.
Wow, look how hot that is.
On that note, a common discussion point about the doc has been Elba's performance. It's very strange. There are times when Idris is energized.
So today is the very special Ashanti Akwesi Day festival. I've been honored to be asked to be part of the procession, and it is an honor.
There are times when he's clearly working hard to sell this thing.
Into the center of the earth. I tell you what, it's so exciting. It's so exciting. It's the first time I've ever seen gold being poured.
And in the sound booth, Idris has a very stilted energy. It could be a deliberate choice, but it feels kind of like he's cold reading the script off a teleprompter that is slightly too far away.
But for me, and I'm pretty sure I'm not alone here, the best thing about gold is being able to wear it.
Just for comparison, here is Elba's performance in a different documentary.
To understand how club culture has become so ingrained in our modern lives, we need to go back to a scene that started on New York's underground. It was the 70s, and the city was suffering.
Idris has close ties to Ghana and has spent several years working to develop a film studio in the region. During his trip where he met the Ashanti king, he also met the president of Ghana to discuss policy and was planning to bring an upcoming film of his to the region.
We could case study my film as a proof of concept.
To what extent this influenced his decision to do the project, we can only speculate, but it's plainly obvious that Idris really turns up in Ghana and less so in Quebec.
Wow, look how hot that is.
What we're left with is a very standard piece of corporate communication with a celebrity voice actor and overly dramatic framing. For the most part, the documentary is just boring. The doc makes boring decisions for self-interested reasons. By way of example, India has the second highest demand for gold after China. The two combine to make up half the world's demand for gold. This makes the World Gold Council very invested in the Indian gold market. So, we get a short sequence in India that alludes to the cultural significance of gold in India. This is a big and genuinely interesting subject, but as will be a common theme, the doc doesn't have time to do interesting. The nuanced significance of gold in Hindu and Ashanti cultures are flanderized into this very odd and uniform notion of respect. Here's Joe specifically responding to a question about the importance of treating gold with spiritual respect, whatever that means.
We come on your program regularly. We talk about gold demand trends. We talk about the significance of India as a market. Pay close attention and see the experience where it just sees a young couple getting married. They talk in great detail about how it's significant beyond the dowry, the wealth creation, or the passing on of that dowry. It's more about how it fits into their society.
Okay, so what he said there doesn't actually happen. For one, Idris isn't there. He doesn't see anything, but besides that, the documentary only focuses on the bride's gold jewelry. The dowry isn't acknowledged at all, likely because it's a complicated, thorny topic to throw at a Western audience. But this is the essence of the documentary on the whole. By volume, it is mostly tacky but inoffensive corporate spin on a shallow engagement with the subject matter. But there are, of course, issues that are too big even for propaganda to just omit, the subjects of colonialism and environment being the two major ones. The doc has a sequence in Johannesburg where the subjects of race and working conditions are quarantined. The film cedes some ground on this, acknowledging that historically gold mining maybe briefly intersected with racism. Elba interviews Franz Bellini, who worked in apartheid-era gold mines and was a leader of a key miners' strike. During that interview, the two don't pull any punches. They are carrying no water for the mines.
We were not really looked after. We were almost like slaves, because what they needed is your labor, nothing else.
However, this film was commissioned by mining companies. So...
there's no hiding from the fact.
No hiding? Yeah.
Gold mining played a major part in shaping South African society during the apartheid years.
Yeah?
But with gold...
The doc then very awkwardly frames gold as a liberating force for black miners.
But with gold comes power. And those gold miners, they knew that.
Because, you see, gold, by being so useful, gave the miners a bargaining chip. By withholding their labor and denying the country access to the gold, really the black community was empowered. It's a subtle reframing of a labor strike, not as the withholding of labor, but as the withholding of product. An inert mineral is stealing the valor of labor unions. It's very weird. We're then abruptly moved to South Deep, an active mine in the region that is making use of remote vehicles operated from the surface. This is an interesting novelty and genuinely represents an improvement in working conditions for at least some stuff, but it doesn't really seem to follow the heavy discussion of apartheid. But as they talk about mechanization, they talk about how it has done at least something for gender equality amongst the workers, and then this segment's purpose comes into focus.
There are ladies who are miners, crew leaders, and then the production supervisor.
Its purpose in the text is to absolve the industry. By saying, here is what happened then, and here is what is happening now, the text argues that mining companies have fixed the problem. That's already wild on its face, but even within the doc, it's absurd. One is a serious politically charged conversation dealing with the subject of race and systemic exploitation. The other is about the quirks of driving a $5 million RC truck for a day job. The argument does not land at all, but the documentary just moves on with entirely undeserved confidence that it has tackled the subject of race in the global mining sector. Then, there's the subject of the environment. Obviously, there is no nuanced discussion of the environmental impacts of mining where the companies come out of it looking good. So, the mandate is simple. Say as little as possible to omit issues while playing up successes. So that explains why the New Zealand segment is the way that it is. But it just sucks. It sucks so bad. The topic is specifically on the closure and restoration of sites, mining companies tidying up after themselves. The segment focuses on the reclamation of Reefton Mine, located on the South Island of New Zealand. The entire sequence is 4 minutes long, of which there's maybe 90 seconds of footage of the mine. We see that the main pit has been filled with water, and we're shown the process used to plant seeds from a helicopter. We're then treated to a CG render of what the site is expected to look like at some unstated point in the future. We close on some B-roll of wildlife, and we're done with New Zealand. Here is the totality of material on the pit.
When the mine closed in 2016, their first task was to fill the main pit, to turn it into a lake. It's nice, but it still looks like a mine to me.
If I held stock in oceanic gold, I would be furious. Anyone with any general knowledge of mining is going to come away from this doc certain that this is a pit lake, the same toxic, corrosive hellholes that you find in a Tom Scott video.
It is a mile wide and so deep that you could fit the new One World Trade Center standing upright in it. Or at least you could if the pit wasn't halfway filled with toxic dilute acid. It looks inviting, but you wouldn't want to swim in there. That is dark and lonely water. It looks toxically blue, and it is. It's alkaline. It's got a pH above 11. It would be like swimming in dilute bleach.
Oh yeah, all that water's nice and blue in there.
But the Reefton pit is not like those pit lakes, and this site is notable for precisely that reason. That's why we're here. Okay, just to back up for a sec. We all know about abandoned mines. A company would work a mine until either the mine or the company went bust, and then they would just walk away. In the case of open-cut mines like Reefton, the pits often fill with rainwater over time to create artificial bodies of water. Pit lakes, or quarry lakes, are exceptionally dangerous places for a whole host of reasons that we'll just put up on screen here for a moment. The majority of fatalities at abandoned mines are attributed to drowning in pit lakes. You may also be familiar with famous sites like the Berkeley Pit in Butte, Montana. Berkeley's pit lake is so contaminated by copper that for about a decade, copper was mined directly from the lake water. This makes the water toxic, and if the pit lake fills beyond a certain point, the forbidden Gatorade will spill into the general water supply, which is considered generally undesirable. In response, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has mandated that the lake must never reach that critical level, so the water must be actively pumped out in perpetuity. But even with that, over the years they've had to just keep making the thing bigger because it's really hard to keep water from getting into an existing lake. The Berkeley pit is a particularly high-profile example, but there are thousands of pit lakes out there, each with their own risk factors. Believe it or not, Tom Scott hasn't even visited half of them. This is not a minor problem. This is one of the fundamental byproducts of the mining process. The thing you are doing at an elemental level is digging a huge hole. Until very recently, it was considered progressive to enforce what is called a lock and leave policy. Mining companies can leave behind a pit that will fill with toxic water, but they at least need to put up a fence. Needless to say, this doesn't do much to mitigate the harm of these pits. Once a pit lake is established, it's incredibly difficult to unwind because now you're dealing with massive volumes of water, which is both very heavy in its own right and does not much care for where you do and do not want it to go. So the solution is simple. Don't let mining companies leave sites in a state that will produce a toxic pit. That is a complex, multidisciplinary process. So, That brings us back to Reefton. In 2004, OceanaGold received approval to operate the Reefton mine. As part of this, they were subject to heavy obligations to restore the site upon closure of the mine, which included the posting of a performance bond that, like a rental bond, was money set aside to cover the restoration of the land in the event Oceana went bust. An operations director for the Department of Conservation praised the company's work, describing it as world-class. Unlike mining operators in the past, OceanaGold prepared for the closing of the mine years ahead of time. They're one of the first to make use of a new water treatment system conceptualized at Cardiff University.
By oxygenating the water before it enters the vertical flow reactor, the iron within the water comes out of solution, turning it a reddish-brown colour. The iron particulate then gently settles on a gravel bed at the bottom of the ponds. Iron naturally attracts other metals and so is able to capture free-floating arsenic from the water. The water continues its gravity-fed course through the gravel bed and exits the system into Devil's Creek. Extensive testing has proven that the vertical flow reactor reliably removes excess arsenic and iron from the water. Over time, the metals will be exhausted from the leachable area of the surrounding rock, and the ponds will continue to naturally spill into Devil's Creek.
I'm sorry, why wasn't any of this in the documentary? The helicopter is not what makes Reefton interesting. It's the ecological restoration that literally gets into the weeds.
The woody material that we place around the restoration sites also provide little microclimates for other species that we wouldn't have planted ourselves, such as these ferns.
Reefton may be the best example of reclamation on the planet. The World Gold Council must think so, otherwise we wouldn't be here. But the doc doesn't want to dig into the subject of restoration in any detail because to celebrate what makes Reefton noteworthy would require admitting that it is exceptional. Hey, these guys have almost cracked the toxic pit problem.
Wait, what toxic pit problem?
It's also hard to overlook the fact that vertical flow reactors are being implemented in New Zealand, South Korea, and the USA. You know, wealthy nations. It's one thing for New Zealand to strong-arm OceanaGold into restoring a site adjacent to a national park, but what about countries in the global south? Human rights organizations have repeatedly found OceanaGold in violation of indigenous rights around their Didipio mine dating back to 2007, accusations including illegal evictions and arson, and have repeatedly recommended that their license to mine be revoked. It was not. And the UN has denounced the unnecessary and disproportionate use of force against local residents as recently as 2020. Can Filipino residents expect OceanaGold to implement world-class restoration techniques to restore their land? Odds aren't great! The work being done at Reefton is interesting and important. It is exceptional in every sense of the word. The documentary went to New Zealand to cherry-pick the most radical project it could find, but still managed to stuff it up. The documentary is only willing to engage with the superficial elements of ecological restoration, specifically the tree planting.
It's really just gardening, but supersized.
In its brief runtime, the documentary focuses exclusively on aesthetics, which is explicitly not what the restoration project is about.
So we're not trying to hide the fact that we mined here, but we're just trying to do our best to put it back.
The community doesn't need the mine's existence obscured, they need the company to clean up their crap and avoid poisoning the groundwater, which is what they're doing, but the documentary would leave viewers believing that the project is greenwashing, simply planting trees around an inevitable hazard. The documentary manages to misrepresent both angles of the subject. It omits the actual reason why closed mines are so dangerous and the meaningful ecological restoration being carried out at the site. The result is that the environmental activists are pissed off, the company shareholders are pissed off, and you, the viewer, are bored. This sucks. Once the doc is satisfied that it has addressed all your concerns and made its case for gold as a thing, it's happy to drop the pretense and fixate on the financials for the last 15 minutes. Idris is given a tour of the Bank of England.
I've got an appointment with the bank's chief cashier, one of the very few people with access to its vaults. Sarah John.
Anyway, Idris gawks at gold bullion for a bit before taking a very brief aside to tastelessly discuss the 2004 Boxing Day tsunami.
On the 26th of December 2004, there was a massive tsunami in the Indian Ocean.
The Boxing Day tsunami is the deadliest natural disaster of the 21st century to date, with over 130,000 confirmed deaths in Indonesia alone, mostly concentrated in the province of Aceh.
But in Aceh, there was something unusual about the community that helped it to recover. You see, most people didn't have saving accounts. Instead, they had gold ingots and jewelry, which meant they could quickly use it as collateral and start putting their lives back together.
So we get that little gold nugget before immediately moving on to hang out with a celebrity jeweler.
Abtin Abbasi, or ABS for short, is part of a new wave in jewelry that began with hip-hop. It's not like it's ever going to depreciate.
100%. It's the same thing buying gold, their investments.
The final segment is functionally an ad for Newmont's operations in Peru, which are still in their speculative stages before the doc wraps up.
So, the story of gold. To me, it's really a love story. Like all romances, it's had its ups and its downs.
What downs, Idris? What downs? What do you think the downs might be? Here, I've got my notes ready to go. I can help make a list. What are the downs?
They're all part of our relationship with this beautiful, seductive metal.
Hey, is this getting weird for anyone else? The core audience for the documentary has received it one of two ways. Your standard gold bugs have love-bombed the doc. Like Crypto Bros and Apes, there is a vested interest in the documentary's success as a tool of propaganda, leading to the same types of astroturf techniques. On the complete other end of the spectrum, the crackpot breed of gold bug has responded to the film with outright hostility, framing it as deliberate misinformation to distract from the truth about gold. Whatever that may be.
I'm willing to bet your coming WGC Gold documentary will be more like a childlike cartoon. You won't dare to try to choke down some of these ongoing spicy facts regarding the current day canard of modern day gold price discovery.
But for us, the documentary's cardinal sin is that it's boring. A documentary on gold could be interesting, should be interesting. But this is what you get when filmmakers try to tell a human story through the filter of industry. The potential is there, but the documentary is tethered to corporate interests from which it cannot stray. Gold is so culturally significant in India that it's a pillar of the global gold industry. That's fascinating. But if you really dug into it, you'd need to talk about the whole dowry thing, and your American investors might find that a bit uncomfortable. Best just not say anything. Just talk about how pretty it is. If we praise Reefton's water quality, then potential investors might learn about the toxic pit lakes that we normally leave behind.
Wait, what toxic pit problem?
So, better just focus on the trees. Corporate interests smother the compelling material, grinding it down to its shallowest form. Essential material is absent, and what material is there is inexplicably boring. Funny thing is that this isn't even the World Gold Council's first crack at this particular concept. In 2021, they released a mini-series called The Golden Thread. Wait, sorry, not a mini-series. A landmark immersive documentary series showcasing gold's impact on humanity's past, present, and future. The hook for this one was that they found experts in fields that use gold in some form or another, aerospace and the like, and then have them talk about their projects.
Gold is critically important to make Moxie work for a number of reasons.
But it's all the same problem. There are specific interests being served. You can't just tell a story where gold is a thematic connector between all these other interesting subjects. You need gold to be the main character. So the whole thing turns into a parade of scientists and engineers and artists talking about their projects as though the most important thing about it is that gold is involved. Like, sure, we detected gravitational waves, that's cool and all, but let's talk about how colliding neutron stars generate a lot of value.
What scientists saw that day was gold being created in space. The gold created in this collision will cycle through the cosmos and perhaps one day will form part of another planet.
The impression isn't that gold is a kinda unique material with useful and interesting physical properties, but literally magic. And when I say there are interests being served and all that, I'm not extrapolating. These people are very explicit. It's in the press release. The purpose of the documentary is to increase the relevance and consideration of gold in the minds of investors and consumers alike. It's kind of maddening. I get so used to dealing with covert propagandists who are trying to smuggle in some ulterior agenda, and the World Gold Council just does my job for me.
Guarded with gold. So, when the unexpected happens and the world is in turmoil, you're protected.
So the thing that I find compelling here is the existence of these corporate propaganda pieces, because the fact that someone decided this was a good project to make, that this was worth the hundreds of thousands of dollars that would have cost even outside of whatever Idris Elba was paid, that in and of itself is an indicator. The World Gold Council doesn't just decide to hire a celebrity spokesperson and plaster his face across the internet because they're bored. They don't make a documentary about how cool gold is because they're just, they think it's neat. They do it because there's something that they think they need to convince us of. It ends up so weird and stilted because they're trying to talk about narrative and meaning, but those ideas are completely foreign to the people who produced this. I want to go back to that interview with Joe Cavatoni because it really helps illustrate that these guys are just living in an alternate universe. So there's this phrase we're all familiar with at this point, selling shovels during a gold rush. The best way to get rich in a gold rush isn't to dig for gold, it's to sell shovels. It's kind of a dark phrase, isn't it? At a basic level, it speaks to some grimmer human instincts: opportunism, exploitation, delusion. It's a phrase about crass pragmatism in the face of irrationality. You would think that a guy who represents the interests of the guys buying shovels would maybe find the phrase a bit distasteful. But these are capitalists in the purest sense of the word.
A lot of people fail to remember that the California gold rush produced a very successful and very wealthy man. That was Levi Strauss. There's a bit in the story about it.
That was a great part of this movie,
and I think you'll really get a good appreciation. Yeah, it's a fun story to understand, and you see how it's not just about gold and mining, but it's about everything in the ecosystem around it that brings it to life.
Yeah, and not just about selling shovels, about selling jeans, for example, to those that are using the picks and the axes, and really kind of...
There's no sentimentality here. There's money to be made. And the thing is that Joe is ultimately a kind of shovel salesman himself. Okay, on one hand, Joe represents companies who dig up gold, companies who literally buy shovels. But the people digging up literal gold aren't the metaphorical gold rush here. Mines aren't panic buying machine parts. The entire thesis of the World Gold Council is that gold, the asset, is a safe harbor in a turbulent market. It's not just a thing for cranks and weirdos with 5 years of canned beans in their booby-trapped shed. Gold is for slick, elegant, savvy people. Ordinary, yet classy. The WGC wants you to know that this could be you.
Gold is everyone's asset.
We live in turbulent times, and the market has been socially elevated as the one real path for building wealth. That's the gold rush. And Joe, with his slick-looking celebrity documentary and calming social media ads, is trying to sell you a shovel.